Imagine your general walks up to you and says, "Good news, lads, I've got a brilliant plan." He points at a ridge 5 miles away. "We just need to walk over there." Simple enough, right? Except the ground between you and that ridge, it's not ground anymore. It's a bottomless soup of mud, corpses, shell craters filled with black water, and enough barbed wire to gift wrap the entire British Isles. Men drowned in that mud, not metaphorically, actually drowned, standing up. This is Passchendaele, and it might just be the most catastrophically stubborn battle in human history. To understand Passchendaele, we need to rewind a little. It's 1917. World War I has been grinding on for 3 years. Both sides are dug into trenches across Belgium and France, and nobody is really going anywhere. It's less epic warfare and more the world's worst standoff. The British are sitting in a place called the Ypres salient, basically a bulge in the front line where they're surrounded by German-held high ground on 3 sides. Think of it like being in a bowl, and the other guys are sitting on the rim with machine guns. It was, to put it diplomatically, not ideal. Now enter Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, British Commander-in-Chief, man of tremendous confidence and somewhat less tremendous results. Haig had a plan, and honestly, on paper it wasn't crazy. Germany's U-boats, their submarines, were absolutely wrecking British supply ships in the Atlantic. The German Navy was operating out of ports on the Belgian coast. Ostend, Zeebrugge. If the British could punch through the German lines at Ypres, swing north, and reach the coast, they could shut those ports down and save thousands of lives at sea. Bold, aggressive, very Haig. But there were complications. Number 1. The French army was in a bad way. After a disastrous offensive on the Western Front, legions of weary French soldiers had begun to mutiny. Haig couldn't count on French support. Britain was going to have to carry this one. Number 2. The offensive kicked off on July 18, 1917, with a bombardment involving 3,000 guns. In just 10 days, an estimated 4.25 million shells were fired. That's a lot of shells. And here's the punchline. All that shelling destroyed something very important underneath the ground. See, Flanders is basically reclaimed marshland. For centuries, the Belgian farmers had built an intricate system of drainage ditches and channels to keep the fields from flooding. The moment you turn that landscape into a giant bowl of craters, the drainage system collapses. Add 4 million artillery shells. Add the rainiest summer in Flanders in over 30 years. And you get, well, you get Passchendaele. On July 31st, 1917, the infantry assault began at 3:50 in the morning. The British pushed forward, and early results were actually pretty decent. Ground was taken. The plan seemed to be working. Then the rain started. Shortly after the initial assault, the heaviest rains in more than 30 years began to fall on Flanders. The artillery shells had not only torn up the land, they had also destroyed the drainage systems that had been keeping the reclaimed marshland dry. Within days, the battlefield was not a battlefield anymore, it was a swamp. Tanks got stuck, artillery sank, horses disappeared up to their bellies, and the soldiers had to keep moving forward, or at least try. We need to talk about the mud for a second, because it wasn't just unpleasant, it was lethal. This wasn't your garden variety sticky mud. This was a thick, glutinous, sucking sludge that could swallow a man whole if he stepped wrong. If you fell into a shell crater filled with water and mud, and nobody was there to pull you out, that was it. That was how you died. Not in a blaze of glory, not charging a machine gun nest. You just sank. And yet General Haig pressed on. The Battle of Langemarck in mid-August, costly. The battles of September slightly better, with the Anzac forces making real gains using smarter bite-and-hold tactics. For a moment, it looked like momentum was building. On September 20th, there was a successful battle near the Meensweg, on September 26th at Polygon Wood, and on October 4th at Broodseinde, during which the Germans suffered heavy losses. Then October came, and October brought the autumn rains. By mid-October, Haig's forces were spent. The Australians and New Zealanders had been fighting in this hellscape for weeks. They were exhausted, battered, and running low on everything. So Haig made a call. He summoned the Canadians. Now, the man commanding the Canadian Corps was General Arthur Currie, and Currie was not impressed. He looked at the battlefield, he looked at the conditions, he did the math, and then he went to Haig and said, essentially, "Sir, with the greatest of respect, this is a terrible idea." Currie argued the attack would cost around 16,000 Canadian casualties for no great strategic gain. He wasn't wrong. Haig told him to do it anyway. Now here's what makes Currie genuinely remarkable. He couldn't stop the battle, but he could prepare for it. He ordered the construction of new roads, the building and improvement of gun pits, and the repair and extension of tram lines. Horses and mules transported hundreds of thousands of shells to the front. He gave his men time to study the ground, understand the objective, and prepare properly. In a war full of commanders who threw men at problems and hoped for the best, Currie was doing something radical. He was thinking. The Canadian assault began on October 26, 1917. 4 phases, 4 attacks. Each one a carefully planned, step-by-step push up the ridge, and every single step was bought in blood. The conditions were, if anything, worse than before. The combination of autumn rain, saturated soil, and the destroyed drainage system had reshaped the landscape into an immense sea of mud in which men, animals, and machines drowned. Soldiers were moving forward on improvised wooden plank roads, called corduroy roads, laid across the mud. Step off those planks, and you sank. The German artillery knew exactly where those roads were and shelled them constantly, and the Canadians kept walking. October 26th, October 30th, November 6th. Phase by phase, the Canadians clawed their way up Passchendaele Ridge, and on the morning of November 6, 1917, the 1st and 2nd Canadian Divisions reached the ruins of Passchendaele village. I say ruins because by this point, when British and Canadian forces finally reached Passchendaele, hardly a trace of the original village structures remained. They hadn't captured a village. They'd captured a name on a map, surrounded by rubble. The battle was officially over on November 10, 1917. Let's do the numbers, and brace yourself because they are not fun. The Allies advanced about 5 miles over the course of more than 100 days for the loss of over 250,000 soldiers killed, wounded, or missing. The Germans had suffered almost as badly, around 250,000 killed or injured. After 100 days, the movement of the front line was merely 8 kilometers. The cost was enormous, more than 600,000 casualties in total. So, was it worth it? Short answer, no. Long answer, also no. The German submarine bases on the coast, the whole reason Haig launched this offensive, were never reached. The British and Canadians captured a ruined ridge that they would later abandon during the German Spring Offensive of 1918. All of that, for nothing they kept. Haig was criticized heavily in the aftermath, and honestly, fairly. In the aftermath of the battle, General Haig was severely criticized for continuing the offensive long after the operation had lost any real strategic value. But history is complicated. Haig wasn't a monster. He was a man shaped by the military doctrine of his era, genuinely convinced that one more push would break the Germans. He wasn't wrong that the Germans were suffering. He was wrong about how much his own side could take. What did Passchendaele achieve? It kept the Germans pinned in Flanders during a critical period. It inflicted massive German casualties at a time Germany was struggling to replace men, and perhaps most importantly, the Canadian tactics developed under Currie at Passchendaele became the blueprint for the 100 Days Offensive in 1918, the final Allied advance that actually ended the war. Passchendaele, awful as it was, taught the Allies how to fight. Tyne-Cot Cemetery, originally just an advanced nursing station, grew after the battle into the largest Commonwealth cemetery in the world. Nearly 12,000 graves, row after row of white headstones, stretching across what used to be a killing ground. It's quiet there now. Passchendaele, a name that became a word that means mud and rain and stubbornness and sacrifice on a scale that is almost impossible to imagine. It wasn't the biggest battle of World War I. It wasn't the deadliest. But somehow, more than any other, Passchendaele captures something about that war. The feeling of men being sent forward again and again into something that couldn't be beaten by just trying harder. It could only be survived. And the men who survived it, they went home and most of them never talked about it. Because how do you explain the mud that ate an army? If this video hit different, hit that like button, subscribe to Fields of Glory for more stories from the battles that shaped the world. And drop in the comments, was Haig a villain, a victim of his era, or somewhere in between? I want to know what you think. Until next time, I'll see you on the next field.